of our 200 hospitals and nearly 50 health systems across the state. We know that there's been a lot of discussion about the need to repair our roads and our bridges, and that's very important. But it's critically important as well that the state invest in its healthcare infrastructure, specifically in hospitals that are the economic anchors of their communities. Governor Pritzker's Healthy Children and Families Transition Committee articulated a compelling vision and path forward for improving the health and wellness of all Illinoisans, including the need to invest in our state's healthcare infrastructure. Let me share a couple of quotes from the Transition Committee's report that was released a few months ago. The people of Illinois are our state's greatest strength, and we must invest in the health and well-being of every Illinoisan to reach our greatest potential. A number of barriers, including systemic disinvestment, have left some communities without essential building blocks of healthy foundations. One way to modernize state and community facilities is to include those infrastructure improvements in a capital bill, and we could not agree more. To achieve this vision of a healthy Illinois, IHA is proposing the Hospital Transformation Capital Program to invest $500 million in state capital funds in hospitals that need to transform their aging facilities to build a coordinated, person-centered system of health and human services that will serve their communities for today and for tomorrow. The Hospital Transformation Capital Program would be administered by the Department of Healthcare and Family Services, which would award capital grants on a competitive basis to facilitate a hospital's transformation to a financially sustainable delivery model. The healthcare landscape is changing drastically, and we all know that, from an inpatient-based system to an outpatient-based system. This means that hospital buildings constructed over the past century need to be modernized and in some cases need to be repurposed. Moreover, there is a growing demand for coordinated systems of care that involve partnerships with other healthcare stakeholders that address social determinants of health. But the reality is that 40% of our hospitals are operating either in the red or at a very thin margin. And for these hospitals, it is difficult to secure the private capital necessary to renew and modernize their facilities to meet the needs of their patients. So for many communities, this transformation will only happen with an investment by the state of Illinois. By including hospitals in a capital program, the state would be investing in the health and well-being of all Illinoisans to allow them to reach their greatest potential. The investment would allow struggling hospitals to transform their delivery systems to meet the needs of their communities and to do so in a financially sustainable manner. This investment would help ensure that the right care is provided at the right time and in the right setting and help hospitals address the social determinants of health. And this investment would create good-paying construction jobs in the near term and good-paying healthcare jobs in the long term. So in order to improve the health and well-being of every Illinoisan, the state must invest in its healthcare infrastructure, and the time to do that is now. Thank you, and now it's my pleasure to introduce State Senator Andy Manar.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. I think AJ you improved on your speaking skills after you left the Senate. You look a lot younger too, I might say. So, good morning to everybody. I want to first thank members of the coalition for coming together to make the case for not just why vertical construction is important in any capital bill, but why the time is now to get this done, and why our approach between now and our adjournment date, which is scheduled for May 31st, needs to be comprehensive in nature and needs to touch every part of the state. The coalition is a demonstration of the desire for the legislature and the governor to pass a truly comprehensive capital bill that will address the diverse needs of our state. And we've heard those needs over the course of the last 2 months through a series of joint committee hearings between the Senate Transportation Committee, which is chaired by my colleague Marty Sandoval, and the Senate Appropriations II Committee, which I chair in the Senate. Many members of the coalition, if not all members, have appeared before the committee and have made their strong case as to why what we want to do makes sense for the state. While we often hear about the need to address our crumbling roads and bridges, which most recently our hearing on Monday in Chicago focused predominantly on surface transportation and mass transit needs, we can't forget that other needs that too often are overlooked or aren't as obvious to the general public have to be included in any capital legislation. Illinois needs cranes on campuses, building buildings, and bulldozers at building sites for buildings that have been around for far too long that need to come down. Construction projects signal that Illinois is open for business. Highway and bridge repairs are vitally important, but any statewide infrastructure plan, again, has to balance the needs of roads and bridges with the priorities for schools, higher education, health care, facilities around the state, non-for-profits, all of the people that get up every day and do the good work of making our state run well. That's what's going to take us in the right direction in Illinois, and that to me is a healthy mix of projects. And that's why the coalition is here today, and that's why I'm here to support it with my presence here and with my words, to advocate for a capital bill that balances the needs of all parts of the state, transportation, mass transit, vertical construction. I would end my comments with this. Many of the, not to play favorites with university presidents, but when universities come before the Senate Appropriations 2 Committee, embedded in their budget requests are costs associated with keeping up aging facilities that otherwise ought to be used on direct services for students. That's happening everywhere in Illinois, on community college campuses, at universities. And to President Carrigan's point, the cost of inaction in Illinois is great. There's a cost to inaction. So we have a month from today. Today's May 1st, right? Yesterday was a whirlwind, but I think today's May 1st. We have 31 days to pass a comprehensive capital plan, and the time is now for us to act. Our next speaker is Dr. Larry Dietz, president of Illinois State University. Dr. Dietz.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Bernard. My name is Larry Dietz. I'm the president of Illinois State University, but I'm also the convener of the Public University Presidents, and all of my presidential colleagues are assembled behind me here. I probably should say what Senator Bernard said and say ditto and sit down. I'm going to be a little bit longer than that, but not much, because he said the bulk of what I would say to you today. But I would say that on behalf of all the presidents of Illinois public universities, I want to express appreciation to the governor and his staff and all the other individuals for strong support for public higher education, and initially just for having a budget. That's a big deal for all of us, and we appreciate that very much, but also for recommendations for a capital bill for FY20. The reasons that Senator Menard mentioned are the reasons that we support progress in this way. When the governor and members of the General Assembly act as advocates for public higher education, transformative impacts can benefit more than the 166,000 students and their families that are enrolled on our campuses statewide. Every dollar that's invested in a capital project is essentially, in turn, an investment in the students that our universities represent, and indeed is an investment in the future of Illinois. And we know from our research that students who receive their higher education in Illinois tend to stay in Illinois, tend to work and become engaged in Illinois, and obviously become tax-paying Illinois residents. And so we're delighted to work toward that end. While we understand and appreciate that the state is experiencing prolonged financial challenges, we also recognize that additional revenue is necessary to provide the level of support higher education needs. We thank the governor and the legislature for exploring new revenue options to protect and enhance the state's most precious resource, the higher education of its citizenry. I would also be remiss if I didn't say that as capital projects and a capital bill is being considered, that it's very important that vendor diversity is encouraged and indeed become a part of that. We are supportive of the Business Enterprise Program and would want to work toward making sure that there's vendor diversity in any new capital that's out there. So we would also like to have some help, frankly, with a little procurement reform that would also help us not only speed projects up, but add some diversity in the vendors that are selected to help do that work. But Senator was exactly right. The dollars over the last decade since we've had a capital budget. The dollars to address deferred maintenance issues and other issues on our campuses really come out of our operating budget, and those are dollars that really should be invested in our students and our faculty and our services for those students. And so we would very much appreciate a capital bill, one that brings quality back to those facilities that serve our students and their families. So with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Good morning. Anyone can drive on a road or bridge in the state and see the need for repairs and upgrades. But what is easily often missed are the millions of dollars to repair and upgrade needed facilities on college campuses throughout the state. My name is Dietz. I'm the president of Elgin Community College. This morning, I'm representing all the community colleges in Illinois. For too long, many of our campuses have been made to choose, do I continue offering class or hire support staff for our students, or do I replace the boiler or HVAC system that are in excess of 10 years old? College recruitment is competitive. One of the greatest selling points for students and their parents are facilities and dormitories. Now think about it this way. This fall, of all 100 Illinois Illinois high school graduates who are going to go to college, 48 are going out of state. 48 out of every 100 high school graduates are going out of state. Why? Well, college campuses, and they visit many campuses, play a role in their decisions. And our facilities in Illinois are crumbling. And these students see them. And so the state of Illinois does a great job of investing in K through 12. And we send 48% out of state. And many of them do not come back. So if we're talking about workforce needs, we are doing a great job of doing the job for other states. That is why we need to invest in vertical facilities on our campuses so that colleges and universities will continue to put their operating money in the classrooms so that more and more students will stay in Illinois. The community college system is requesting $150 million in capital renewal requests and $352 million in new funding. The millions in renewal requests are projects that have been deferred over the years and have sat dormant. In fact, there are some campuses that you see holes that were dug a few years in anticipation of funding, and the money never came. Let me conclude by talking about a couple of things more. Community colleges served underrepresented communities. We are doing a great job addressing issues related to equity. Capital spending will help us down the road. My last point. I have a headache now. And what is it? I have donations in equipment, close to $1 million, and my headache is, where am I going to put the equipment? Manufacturing is back. All the community colleges are working closely with businesses in the communities, and they are making donations. And most of us do not even have the space to put the equipment so that we can train the much needed individuals to serve the manufacturing community. This is critical. We do not have any option but to make sure that Community colleges and universities are funded with vertical equipment to serve us for many years to come. Thank you.
All right, you've heard from a couple of the coalition members, and obviously you can see there are other members up here. Everybody has been working hard. Everybody identifies the real need for a capital bill, but Build Up Illinois is about bringing all the stakeholders together and trying to speak in a coordinated manner with one loud voice. But this is something that's imperative that we need to get done in the month of May. We'll take a few questions, and among us will determine who's best to answer that.
Do you have any recommendations for the governor and lawmakers how to pay for all this?
Senator, you do mind? I know you've been in some of the transportation, capital infrastructure hearings. There has been a couple of meetings. There has been lots of conversation. I don't know that they've contained the list yet. I do believe they want bipartisan input. But Senator?
Sure. So let me give you just an update on what we've done in a bipartisan way so far and where I think this is going to go. So legislators from all four caucuses, led by Governor Pritzker's office, have been meeting for any number of weeks now. I think it's probably close to about 6 to, I'd say maybe 2 months now. So our process is fairly simple. We want to identify what the need is. So what is going to go out the door? What are priorities? That obviously is leading us down a path of identifying more priorities than, frankly, I think we have the ability to pay for, which means that prioritizing projects and balancing all that the needs are in the state are going to be a challenge. Equally as challenging is how to pay for whatever those needs are. So our process thus far is all revenue ideas are welcome at the table, and all revenue ideas are being discussed. I don't know of any that have been unilaterally dismissed, but we have focused on several, and I would expect within the next few weeks we would see both the beginning phases of a bill that would represent, I would hope, some bipartisan agreement on both the spending side and the revenue side.
Can you characterize what kind of ideas are being floated out there besides the gas tax?
Yeah, there's, so let me just qualify my remarks and say this is just me speaking, Doug. I mean, I don't represent the group of legislators that have been meeting. I don't represent the Senate Democratic Caucus on this. I'm telling you my opinion, okay? So if you look at, first of all, if you look at capital bills, both under Governor Ryan and under Governor Quinn, they were bipartisan in nature. I don't think this is any different this time around, despite supermajorities by the Democratic Party and, of course, Governor Pritzker being a Democrat. I think this has to be a bipartisan agreement. That's how you generate enough votes for revenue to pay for what we need to pay for in a capital bill. So in the past, we've looked toward gaming. I think that's challenging, but that obviously is in the mix. We've looked toward taxes on liquor, which have been done in the past. There's any number of proposals that have been floated by the Chamber of Commerce and TFIC and other organizations not related to Build Up Illinois, which is what we're here for, but for surface transportation that includes nominal increases or moderate increases to vehicle registration or the gas tax that would go into the road fund. I think we should expand our reach, and we've had significant discussion on new ideas like a ride-sharing surcharge, which is obviously put in place today in the city of Chicago, and it, in my opinion, ought to be statewide, and that could be used for paying for projects. Now, there's many more that others have brought to the table, and our process right now is to try to sort through those. And my crystal ball tells me that whatever can achieve 30 votes and 60 votes are going to be the mechanics of a revenue bill.
Does the lockbox on the transportation funds from the gas tax, I guess, put a crimp in the style of what you're trying to do?
No, I don't think it does. First of all, because I think that without the lockbox, I don't think we would be having the level of conversation we're having today about a capital bill. I think that is, that was a precursor, a very important precursor to the conversation today. But in years past, revenues that focus on surface transportation have been used for surface transportation that have not been used for vertical. So that's the balancing act, and I think that's one reason why the coalition has come together, is to say that we will employ people, whether we build a building on SIU's campus or ISU's campus, or we invest in a critical access hospital in Southern Illinois. That's going to employ people just like a road project. We have plenty of people that need work, and there's multiple ways to do it. And a capital bill that balances surface needs and vertical needs is an appropriate balance.
Do you have a total target number for the amount of investment in billions?
I don't want to dominate the microphone, so if anybody wants to jump in, feel free. We don't. I would just reiterate what I said earlier. I think it's realistic. And by the way, this is not me saying let's throw in the towel, but we've gone a decade, and that was after a decade of inaction. So we've tackled this thing once every 10 years. So that, coupled with a budget impasse, I think has caused the need to balloon significantly. So I think it's realistic to say publicly that we're not going to be able to check a box on every project that these folks here, if they were to say, here's our list, I would, and I've said this publicly in hearings, I say respectfully, we're not going to be able to do all of those things. But we will be able to get through a significant number of priorities for the state that make complete sense, not just for employment, but for retaining students, for expanding health care, for making sure that overcrowded classrooms in K through 12 public schools have the investment they need to relieve that overcrowding, coupled with significant efforts toward getting at inequity. So we can get through most of what we need. We're not going to be able to do all of what we need. But that goes back to the previous question. Whatever we can, achieve 30 votes and 60 votes on is what eventually is going to be the contents of the bill.
President CARRIGAN talked about you shouldn't just do a one-time thing, but sometimes you issue bonds, and then the revenue sources pay off those bonds over a long period of time. Are you looking at something that is more than that can have new projects every year, or is it something that's going to be one big
Well, why don't you
project?
start,
Okay.
and then I'll
So
augment.
again, my opinion is we should learn from the past, and this is a tough thing, but we have to take tough votes. And I say we, I mean legislators need to, I think, be prepared to take difficult votes in the next 5 weeks on budget, on capital, and within capital is this point. We should acknowledge that this should not be a once-in-a-decade proposition in Illinois. We should have an ongoing program that is coupled, bonding coupled with pay-as-you-go capital investment. There was a day in the state's history where that happened, and that's when we had stability in not just our budget, but we had stability in our economy. We had more stability in our employment, and a piece of that is ongoing capital investment in the state. So I'm asking, as one member of the Senate, to have serious consideration to making sure that there's a pay-as-you-go component, so that when the bonding is over, Bernie, we have still investment, so that, so for example, when ISU has a boiler go down or has a significant problem which comes up when you run a campus, right, that they don't have to dip into funds that otherwise would be used for direct education services. That's an appropriate role for state government, and that's an appropriate support, for example, for ISU. Those things have gone by the wayside, and that's one, not the reason, but one reason why we've seen some of the struggles we've seen with higher education.
Do you want half pay-as-you-go, or can you?
I don't have a number. I just think it's important to have both.
Senator Menard complimented A.J. Wilhelmi on his speaking skills, but I want to give the same compliment to the senator. He's very serious. He's very responsible. Out of coincidence, he's my senator, so I'm very, very proud of him. Bertie, you talked about a lockbox. The meetings that I have been into in this session, I've not heard lockbox. I've heard identifying projects, a phrase from the past, shovel ready. I've heard life safety issues would be part of prioritizing, and then just trying to dig in and find what's the first list that we start with. But you know, I didn't coin this, but we need an annual capital bill that every year brings up a new group of projects, and they can be funded properly. Planning can take place properly, and phrases from the past. These aren't Democrat roads. These aren't Republican bridges. These schools, these universities, the veterans' homes. These are all common denominator issues which keeps this state going, and the citizens of this community, of this state, deserve this. So we've got to find a way to get it done.
If it is license plate fees or gas tax or something like that, you could say it's regressive because everybody pays the same no matter what their income is. You're doing this in the middle of trying to have the governor's trying to pass the progressive income tax constitutional amendment. How hard does that make this when you're going to be hitting all incomes with whatever you're doing here?
Well, it makes it, I mean, it obviously makes it challenging. I talked to several reporters over the last, kind of the lead up to everyone coming back here yesterday, and I don't for a second think that anything we have to do between now and May 31st is easy. But the alternative, and I think the governor appropriately outlined this in his budget address. If you go back to February 20th when he presented his budget proposal, he was spot on when he described what the choices are that we have in the state. So we could take a pass on a capital bill because it's easy or it suits politics well, because it's less tough if we just don't do it. But it has been said time and again, what is the cost of not doing what is the challenging thing or the difficult thing here? And the cost is more of the same in Illinois. It's crumbling roads, it's dangerous bridges that are going to be closed down, it's universities spending money that otherwise would be used to retain students in Illinois to fix things, it's community colleges not being able to offer workforce training programs to the unemployed or those seeking employment, it's overcrowded K through 12 schools, it's the lack of mental health services in counties that I represent that could be afforded that opportunity through partner hospitals if they had a facility to do it. I mean, the list is endless. It's an endless list of needs, and it's because of inaction, and frankly, it's because of time and time again, we haven't done difficult things here. So it's time to do difficult things.
Our officers. Jeff Berkowitz, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. We're going to take a bit of an in-depth look at the run for the mayor of Chicago. The Illinois Channel, keeping you connected to your state, your issues, your home.